I called the broker for the 11th time that morning. Straight to voicemail. Again. I set the phone down on the desk and picked it up and dialed again. Voicemail. I refreshed the investment dashboard on my laptop. The page loaded slowly, the way it always did, and then the numbers appeared on the screen. $200,000. My $200,000. The balance showed exactly what it had shown for the past 3 weeks: no movement, no returns, no activity of any kind. Just the original deposit sitting there like a stone at the bottom of a dry well. I had been ignoring the feeling in my chest for 3 weeks. The low, persistent unease that started the first time the broker's phone rang out without answer. I had told myself it was normal. Investments take time. These things have quiet periods. Stop watching the numbers every day. But 11 unanswered calls across 4 days was not a quiet period. I heard my wife Camille come into the study behind me. I turned around. She was standing in the doorway, arms crossed loosely, looking at me with an expression I could not immediately name. Not worried. Not frightened. Just quiet. Her eyes moved to the laptop screen and then back to my face. Still no answer, she said. No, I said. She nodded slowly. And said nothing else. That silence, that particular, unhurried silence, was the moment fear became something sharper. Camille, I said. Something is wrong. She uncrossed her arms and moved to the chair beside the desk. She sat down with the composed, unhurried movement of someone who had already decided how this conversation was going to go. These things take time, Dorian, she said. You know that. I've called 11 times, I said. The calls go straight to voicemail. Every single one. Maybe he's traveling, she said. Maybe there's a legal quiet period around the bond cycle. You don't know the full structure of how these things operate. I looked at her. Her voice was even. Measured. She was not wringing her hands. She was not pulling out her own phone to call the broker herself. She was not doing any of the things a person does when $200,000 of shared money has gone silent and the person managing it has disappeared. She was calm in a way that didn't make sense. When I had hesitated to invest 3 months ago, she had been the opposite of calm. She had been urgent, persistent, almost frustrated by my slowness. Now the money was potentially gone and she was telling me to be patient. You're not worried, I said. It wasn't a question. She met my eyes steadily. I'm trying to be rational, she said. One of us has to be. But there was something behind her eyes that I couldn't read. And that unreadable thing frightened me more than the voicemail. 3 months earlier, Camille had come home on a Thursday evening with a folder. I remembered it clearly now that I was looking back with different eyes. She had set it on the dining table while I was finishing dinner and sat down across from me with the particular energy of someone who had been rehearsing a conversation. I want to show you something, she said. The folder contained a brochure, a prospectus, and a 1-page summary of projected returns. Mortgage bond investment. Property-backed. Fixed quarterly returns of 8% annually. Capital guaranteed against registered property assets. It looked professional. Clean design. Official-looking stamps on the documentation. Where did you find this? I asked. A contact introduced me, she said. Someone reliable. This is not speculative, it's backed by actual property. The risk is minimal. I read through the material slowly while she watched. 8% quarterly sounds high, I said. It's annual, she corrected quickly. Paid quarterly. That's standard for this kind of instrument. I asked several more questions. She had answers for all of them, quick, confident, well-prepared answers that satisfied me in the moment but that I now realized had the quality of answers that have been practiced rather than answers that come from genuine understanding. She had known exactly what I was going to ask. Because she had been ready for me. The pressure had started the following week. I had taken the documents to work and read through them again on my lunch break. Something still felt slightly off, not wrong exactly, but not completely right either. I told Camille that evening that I wanted more time to think. She was quiet for a moment. Then, how much more time? A few weeks, I said. I want to do more research. The window closes at the end of the month, she said. This is a limited allocation. Once it fills, that's it. Then we miss this one, I said. Her jaw tightened slightly. Dorian, I have done the research. I have spoken to people who have used this broker before. The returns are real and documented. If we wait, we lose the opportunity. We could start smaller, I suggested. Put in 50,000 and see how the first quarter goes. The minimum is 200,000, she said immediately. I looked at her. That's a lot of money to commit based on a brochure, I said. It's a lot of money to leave sitting in a savings account earning 1%, she said. We went back and forth for 2 more weeks. Every time I raised a concern, she had a response. Every time I suggested waiting, she pointed to the closing deadline. Every time I proposed a smaller amount, she explained why the minimum was structured that way. Looking back now, that wasn't enthusiasm. That was management. I called the company's main office line at 9 in the morning. A disconnected tone. 3 beeps and silence. I tried the secondary number listed on the prospectus. The same tone. I opened my email and sent a formal message to the contact address on the letterhead. The response came back within seconds, a delivery failure notice. The email address no longer existed. I opened a browser and searched for the company name. The website was gone. Not down, gone. The domain returned a blank page with a hosting error message, the kind that appears when a domain registration has been allowed to expire or has been deliberately abandoned. I searched the company registration number printed on the official documents Camille had given me. The registration appeared in the public records database, but the status showed as recently dissolved. Filed for dissolution 11 days ago. 11 days ago. The same week the broker stopped answering his phone. I sat back in my chair. $200,000. Invested in a company that no longer existed, through a broker who no longer answered, in a scheme that had apparently been designed to disappear on a specific timeline. The room felt very still. I had not been unlucky. I had been targeted. I found Camille in the kitchen and told her everything I had discovered. The disconnected numbers. The bounced emails. The dissolved company registration. The disappeared website. I laid it out plainly, one fact after another, the way you present information when you need the other person to understand the full shape of what has happened. She listened. And when I finished, she was quiet. Not the quiet of shock. Not the sudden intake of breath, the hand going to the mouth, the immediate flood of questions that comes when someone has just heard that a significant amount of shared money is gone. Just quiet. She turned back toward the counter. Picked up her coffee cup. Set it down again. We should wait a few more days, she said finally. Before we do anything. Wait for what? I asked. The company is dissolved. The broker isn't answering. There is nothing to wait for. You don't know that for certain, she said. I stared at the back of her head. Camille, I said. We have been scammed. She turned around then. Her face was composed. You're jumping to conclusions, she said quietly. And then she walked out of the kitchen. Not running. Not upset. Just leaving. Moving away from the conversation with the unhurried ease of someone who had already decided how much of it they were willing to engage with. I stood in the kitchen alone. And the shape of something terrible began forming in my mind. I could not sleep that night. At 2 in the morning I got up quietly and went to the home office. I opened the joint account portal on my laptop and began going through the transaction history. The investment transfer was their $200,000, sent to an external account 6 weeks ago. But when I looked at the exact date, something stopped me. I pulled up the original investment timeline Camille had shown me. According to the documentation, the investment window closed on the last day of the month. The funds were supposed to be transferred on confirmation of the bond allocation, which Camille had told me came through on the 28th. But the bank transfer had gone out on the 14th. 2 weeks earlier. Before I had given final confirmation. Before we had the conversation where I agreed. Before I had signed anything. I sat very still and read the date again. The 14th. I had agreed to the investment on the 26th after one final conversation where Camille assured me the documentation was in order. But the money had left our account 12 days before that conversation happened. She had transferred it before I agreed. Before I knew it. I waited until morning to say anything. I needed to be certain I had read the dates correctly. I checked 3 times. The transfer had gone out on the 14th. My agreement conversation with Camille had happened on the 26th. The gap was 12 days. Over breakfast I asked her, carefully, when exactly the funds had been transferred. When the allocation is confirmed, she said. End of the month. That's what the documentation says. The bank record shows the 14th, I said. She looked up from her coffee. That must be a processing date, she said. Banks sometimes record things differently. A 12-day processing delay? It happens with international transfers, she said. This wasn't an international transfer, I said. It went to a domestic account. She set down her coffee cup. Dorian, I don't understand what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, I said. I'm asking why the money left our account before I agreed to the investment. Her expression shifted, something hardening behind her eyes. I was acting on the timeline we discussed, she said. You were going to agree. You'd been going back and forth for weeks. I made a judgment call. You transferred $200,000 without my knowledge or consent, I said. I transferred our money into an investment we had agreed on. I hadn't agreed yet. She stood up. You're overthinking this, she said sharply. You're looking for someone to blame because the investment hasn't performed and you're scared. Stop looking at me like I'm the problem. She left the kitchen. I sat with my coffee going cold. She was deflecting. I had seen it clearly for the first time. That afternoon I went back to the company registration records. I searched every document connected to the dissolved company, the registered directors, the registered address, the filing history. The director listed on the original registration was a man named Fabian Cork. I did not recognize the name. But I recognized something about it. The last name. Cork. I had heard that name before. Recently. In a context that I couldn't immediately place. I sat with it for several minutes, turning it over. Then I searched it alongside the company name in a broader web search. Several results appeared, mostly registration filings and a LinkedIn profile that had been recently deactivated. The profile photo was small and low resolution. A man in his mid-30s, dark jacket, professional headshot style. I looked at the profile name again. Fabian Cork. I pulled up the documents Camille had given me 3 months ago. The broker who had presented the investment was listed simply as F. Cork, independent financial consultant. I stared at the screen. The broker and the company director were the same person. Which meant the broker hadn't just been selling the product. He had created it. The name kept pulling at something in my memory. Cork. I went back through my mental files, trying to place it. Then it came. 18 months ago, Camille had mentioned a former colleague from her previous job, a man she had worked with briefly before she changed companies. She had brought him up once in passing when we ran into someone who knew him at a social event. His name was Fabian. She had described him as a casual acquaintance. Someone from the office. Not close. I searched Camille's former employer on LinkedIn and filtered the results. Fabian Cork appeared immediately. His employment history showed he had worked at the same company as Camille for 2 years, overlapping with her time there completely. They had been colleagues for the full period of her employment. Not a casual acquaintance. A direct co-worker for 2 years. I looked at his current listed occupation. Independent financial consultant. The same description on the investment brochure Camille had handed me 3 months ago. I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet office for a long time. The picture forming in my mind was one I did not want to look at directly. But I could no longer pretend it wasn't there. I waited until Camille was deeply asleep. I am not proud of what I did next. I had never gone through her phone in 11 years of marriage. I had never had reason to. But the dates, the name, the transfer, the silence, each piece had added to the next until I was sitting in the dark of our bedroom at 1 a.m, reaching for her phone on the nightstand. I went to her messages. I found the conversation with Fabian Cork immediately. It was not buried or hidden. It was simply there, in her regular messaging app, between a thread from her sister and a group chat from her book club. I scrolled upward through the messages slowly. They went back 8 months. 8 months of conversation, frequent, comfortable, familiar in a way that told its own story before I had read a single word of content. The rhythm of the messages, the casual shorthand, the easy back and forth, this was not occasional professional contact between former colleagues. This was daily communication between 2 people who knew each other very well. I kept scrolling. The investment scheme appeared in the messages 4 months ago, introduced casually, discussed in detail, refined over several exchanges. Camille had asked specific questions about how to present it. Fabian had coached her on the answers. Then I found the message that stopped me completely. It was sent from Fabian to Camille, dated 3 weeks before I agreed to the investment. Once the money clears, we disappear. 6 months is enough. Don't push for more, it draws attention. I read it 3 times. Once the money clears, we disappear. 6 months is enough. I set the phone down on the nightstand very carefully, as if it might break, or as if I might. I lay back on my side of the bed and stared at the ceiling. My wife was asleep 12 inches away from me. She had introduced me to a scheme designed to steal our money. She had pressured me past my hesitation. She had transferred the funds before I formally agreed. She had coordinated the timeline with the broker. And she had known from the beginning, from the very first Thursday evening when she brought that folder home and set it on the dining table, that the money was never coming back. She had sat across from me at that table and looked me in the eyes and explained a fraudulent investment with the confidence of someone delivering rehearsed lines. 11 years of marriage. And she had looked me in the eyes. I lay in the dark for a long time, not sleeping, not moving. And the past began rearranging itself. The late-night call she took in the other room, door closed, voice low. I had assumed work. She had a demanding job. Late calls were not unusual. In the evenings she came home later than expected, explaining traffic or a meeting that ran long. Completely plausible. I had never questioned them. The 3-day trip she had taken 4 months ago, a professional development conference 2 cities away. She had sent photos of the conference venue and the hotel. I had looked at them for 30 seconds and put my phone away. I thought about the months of conversations about financial planning, investment diversification, and building wealth beyond our savings accounts. Those conversations had started about a year ago, introduced gradually, building a foundation of shared thinking that made the eventual investment proposal feel like a natural next step in a discussion we had both been part of. It hadn't been a discussion. It had been preparation. She had spent months creating the context in which the proposal would land easily. Every late call. Every unexplained absence. Every gentle nudge toward the idea of higher yield investments. I had been managed. Carefully, patiently, over a long period of time. By someone who knew me well enough to know exactly how to do it. The next morning, I made a decision. I was not going to confront her. Not yet. Not with raw shock and no plan. I had learned something the night before that changed everything, but learning it and proving it were different things entirely. If I confronted her now, she would deny it, she would deflect, and she would have time to delete the messages and move whatever else needed moving before I had anything solid. So, I performed. I came to breakfast looking tired and defeated, which was not difficult, because I was both of those things genuinely. I told her I had barely slept. That I was trying to accept the loss. Maybe she was right and I had been jumping to conclusions. She looked at me carefully. Then something in her posture relaxed by a small, almost invisible degree. "I think that's the right approach," she said gently. "These things happen. The important thing is we're okay." "Yes," I said. "That's what matters." She made coffee and brought me a cup without being asked. I thanked her and drank it and kept my face completely calm. Inside I was building a list. Every piece of evidence I needed. Every step I had to take. Everything I needed to document before she had any idea that I had seen those messages. She thought I had accepted the loss. I had actually just begun. I started that same afternoon. While Camille was out, I went back to her phone and photographed every message in the conversation with Fabian Cork. Every exchange. Every date. Every instruction he had given her and every response she had sent. I saved everything to an encrypted folder on a cloud account she had no access to. Then I pulled the bank records and documented the unauthorized transfer, the date, the amount, the destination account number. I cross-referenced the destination account with the company registration filing I had found online. The account matched a subsidiary listed in the company's dissolved registration documents. I photographed the investment brochure she had given me. The prospectus. The projected returns document. The fake registration stamps. I created a timeline. Every date I could verify: the first conversation about the investment, the dates of her messages with Fabian, the transfer date, the date the company was dissolved, the date the broker stopped answering. Laid out in sequence, it told a clear story. A conspiracy that had been running for at least 8 months. Planned. Coordinated. Executed from inside my own home by someone I had trusted completely. I organized everything into a single document and saved multiple copies. Then I searched for a lawyer who specialized in financial fraud. 3 days into my quiet research, I found something unexpected. I had been searching Fabian Cork's name across multiple business registration databases, trying to understand the full scope of what he had been running. The dissolved company was the one he had used for our transaction. But financial fraudsters rarely run only one vehicle. I searched variations of his name and his known addresses. A new company appeared in the results. Registered 6 weeks ago, just after the original company was dissolved. Different name. Different registered address. But the director listing was the same. Fabian Cork. He had not disappeared. He had simply moved. The new company was already active, already had a basic website, already had a professional-looking brochure available for download that used nearly identical language to the one Camille had brought home 3 months earlier. He was still operating. Still targeting people. I downloaded everything from the new company's website and added it to my evidence file. Then I thought about the people currently looking at that brochure, the same way I had looked at one 3 months ago, trusting the clean design and the official-looking stamps and the competent person sitting across from them explaining guaranteed returns. I called the lawyer that same evening. Her name was Adiz Nwosu. She was a financial fraud attorney with 12 years of experience. She had a direct manner and the particular patience of someone who has heard many difficult stories and knows how to move through them efficiently without making the person telling them feel rushed. I laid out everything in her office: the documents, the timeline, the photographs of the messages, the bank transfer discrepancy, the dissolved company, the new active company. She reviewed it in organized silence. When she looked up, her expression was serious but not hopeless. "This is fraud," she said. "Deliberate and documented. The messages alone establish a conspiracy between your wife and the broker." "Can we build a case?" I asked. "A strong one," she said. "The unauthorized transfer establishes financial misconduct independent of the fraud. The messages show premeditation and coordination. The company records show Cork created the scheme specifically to receive and dissolve." She paused. "But there is one thing we still need," she said. "What?" I asked. "A direct admission or a slip, something from your wife that places her knowledge of the scheme beyond any possible innocent explanation." She looked at me carefully. "The messages are strong. But a direct statement from her that reveals inside knowledge would make this case airtight." I nodded slowly. I already had an idea of how to get it. I chose a Sunday evening. We had finished dinner. The house was quiet. I poured us both tea and sat across from her at the dining table. The same table where she had first shown me the folder, in what now felt like a different life. I told her I had been thinking about the loss and I wanted to understand what had happened. Not to blame anyone. Just for my own peace of mind. She relaxed visibly. "I understand," she said. "It's natural to want closure." "I keep wondering about the timing," I said. "The way the company dissolved so quickly after the investment cleared. These things sometimes happen fast," she said. "Do you know when the dissolution was filed?" I asked casually. She looked at me. "No," she said. "It was filed exactly 4 weeks after our transfer cleared," I said. "Almost to the day." She was quiet. "That's an interesting coincidence," I said. "Is it?" she said carefully. "The thing I keep thinking about," I continued, keeping my voice conversational, "is that 4 weeks is exactly the window Fabian mentioned in his timeline." She looked up sharply. "What timeline?" she said. "He had a timeline for the full cycle," I said. 4 weeks from transfer to dissolution. "You remember, he explained it when you first presented the documentation." Her face shifted. "Yes," she said quietly. "Right." She had just confirmed she knew details of a timeline I had invented. Details only someone involved would agree to having heard. Adiz filed the case 10 days later. I had moved out of the house the week before, quietly and without drama, staying at a friend's apartment while the legal process began. I had taken copies of everything, the documents, the photographs, the evidence files, and left the originals with Adiz. Camille was served on a Tuesday morning. My friend Kofi, who lived 2 streets away from the house, texted me that afternoon. He had seen her in the front garden after the process server left. She was standing very still, holding the papers, not moving. Kofi said she stood there for a long time before going back inside. That stillness, I understood it. It was the moment when the thing you have been managing and controlling and staying ahead of finally catches up. When the distance you thought you had maintained disappears and you realize the ground has been closing behind you the whole time. I felt something when Kofi told me. Not satisfied. Not triumph. Something more complicated than that. 11 years of marriage ended in a legal filing on a Tuesday morning because of a choice she had made that I still, even now, could not fully understand. I put my phone in my pocket and went back to work. There were still things to do. The first court appearance was 4 weeks after the filing. Camille arrived with her attorney, a man named Prescott who had a reputation for aggressive defense in financial cases. She was dressed carefully. Her expression was composed and faintly sorrowful, the expression of someone who has decided to play a specific role. She denied everything. Her position, presented through Prescott, was that she had been as much a victim as I had. That Fabian Cork had deceived her along with everyone else. That she had genuinely believed in the investment and had encouraged me out of good faith, not knowing the scheme was fraudulent. That the messages could be interpreted as the communication of a trusting investor with a broker she had misguidedly believed was legitimate. The unauthorized transfer, Prescott argued, was a judgment call made in a marriage where both parties shared financial decision-making. She sat at the defendant's table and looked at the judge with steady, sorrowful eyes. I watched her from across the courtroom. She was performing carefully and convincingly. But Fabian Cork had not yet been located, and the case felt, for a moment, like it was resting on interpretation rather than certainty. I looked at Adiz beside me. She was writing notes with the unhurried focus of someone who knows exactly what is coming next. The messages were presented on the second day. Adiz introduced them methodically. The full conversation thread between Camille and Fabian Cork, printed and submitted as evidence, dated and sourced from Camille's own device records obtained through the legal discovery process. The judge read sections aloud. The coaching exchanges, Fabian telling Camille exactly how to answer my questions about the structure, Camille reporting back on how my concerns had been handled. The timeline discussions. The coordination of the transfer date. And then the message that stopped everything. Once the money clears, we disappear. 6 months is enough. Don't push for more, it draws attention. The judge read it twice. Then he set the document down and looked at Camille. Her composure, which had held through the earlier readings with impressive steadiness, shifted in a way that was small but visible. A tightening around her eyes. A slight adjustment of her hands on the table in front of her. Prescott leaned toward her immediately and whispered something. She nodded and looked back at the judge with recovered stillness. But the jury had seen it. Adiz had seen it. I had seen it. The mask was still in place. But something behind it had cracked. The financial records came in on the third day. Adiz presented the full transfer history alongside the company registration documents and the account records obtained through the court order. The timeline was laid out visually. A chart showing every movement of money from our joint account through the subsidiary account to the final destination account registered in a holding structure connected to both Fabian Cork and a second named party. The second named party was a company registered 18 months ago. The listed director was Camille's name. Not a maiden name. Not a variation. Her full legal name, exactly as it appeared on our marriage certificate. Prescott objected immediately. The judge noted the objection and allowed the record to stand. The chart showed clearly, the $200,000 from our joint account had passed through 3 intermediate accounts and arrived, in part, in an account she herself directed. She had not just helped facilitate the scheme. She had been a direct beneficiary. The courtroom was very quiet as the judge reviewed the records. Camille looked straight ahead. But her hands on the table in front of her were no longer still. The ruling came on the final day of the hearing. The judge spoke clearly and without haste. The evidence established, beyond the standard required in civil proceedings, that the investment scheme had been deliberately constructed as a fraud. The messages demonstrated premeditation and coordination. The financial records demonstrated direct benefit to the defendant. The unauthorized transfer demonstrated financial misconduct within the marriage independent of the fraud. The scheme was ruled a fraudulent conspiracy. Camille's assets were frozen pending full financial investigation. The portion of the transferred funds traceable to the holding company she directed was subject to recovery proceedings. The court referred the criminal elements of the case, the conspiracy, the fraud, the unauthorized transfer, to the prosecuting authority for separate criminal proceedings. Prescott immediately indicated an intention to appeal. The judge noted it and moved on. I sat beside Adiz and looked at the table in front of me. $200,000 might not all come back. Some of it might be unrecoverable regardless of the ruling. Financial fraud rarely produces complete restitution. But the truth was on record now. In a courtroom. In a ruling. In documents that could not be revised or deleted or walked away from. What she had done existed permanently in the official record. That was something no appeal could remove. Fabian Cork was located 6 weeks after the ruling. He had been operating under the new company name, the one I had found during my research, and had already processed at least 3 additional fraudulent investments using nearly identical documentation to the scheme he had run with Camille. A financial crimes investigation unit tracked him through the new company's bank accounts, which connected to the same network of subsidiary structures used in our case. He was arrested on a Thursday morning. The arrest was reported briefly in the financial news, a small item, 2 paragraphs, buried in the business section. Fraudster arrested following multi-victim mortgage bond scheme. Several investors defrauded across multiple transactions. Investigation ongoing. Adi sent me the article. I read it once. The scheme that had started with a folder on a dining table, a polished brochure, and a wife who had answers ready for every question I asked. It was fully exposed now. Every piece visible. Every connection is documented. Every person involved is named in official proceedings. Fabian Cork had built something designed to be invisible. A company that dissolved cleanly, a broker who disappeared on schedule, documentation professional enough to pass casual inspection. He had not accounted for someone who refused to accept the loss and kept looking. Neither had Camille. She called 3 months after the ruling. I let it ring. She called again the following day. And the day after that. Then a message arrived, carefully written, the kind of message you write and rewrite before sending. She said she had made a terrible mistake. She said she had been in a situation she didn't know how to get out of. She said she was sorry in a way that was meant to sound like the deepest kind of sorry. I read it once. Then I set my phone face down on the table. I was sitting in my new apartment. A small place, quieter than the house had been, with good light in the mornings and a view of a park I had started walking through before work. I had not replaced the furniture yet. The room still had the slightly empty quality of a space that is between one version of itself and the next. I was between versions of myself too. That was honest, and I had stopped pretending otherwise. I thought about the Thursday evening she had brought home that folder. The way she had sat across from me with her prepared answers. The way she had looked me in the eyes for months while knowing what she knew. Trust is built slowly. Over years of small confirmations, small moments of consistency that accumulate into something you stop questioning because questioning it has stopped feeling necessary. It